Are you a trucker looking for a safe and reliable place to park? Look no further than Truck Parking Club. With locations across the country, we've got the perfect spot waiting for you, whether it's daily or long-term parking. And right now, use promo code DELIVERED at checkout for an exclusive discount. Reserve your spot today at truckparkingclub.com and drive stress-free, knowing your parking is covered.
All right, welcome to That's Delivered. I'm your host, Ray. And today we're diving into some fascinating insights with Jeffrey Short, Vice President of the American Transportation Research Institute, also known as ATRI. Jeff is based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and brings 19 years of experience in transportation research, specializing in policy management, um, data management, freight performance measurement. He has published key reports on transportation finance, led research on driver hours of service regulations, and explored the future of freight technologies. I can't wait to dig into all of that. Jeff, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Ray. I appreciate you having me on here. I'm calling in here from Atlanta, Georgia, and looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad to have you here. And for all our listeners, they're going to enjoy this episode. Just to get a background of your journey, trying to kick things off with what sparked your interest in the transportation research and what did you, how did you end up at ATRI?
This goes back to when I was basically a kid. I had my driver's license. I had just gotten my driver's license, and I had a job at kind of an old-fashioned but high-volume car dealership. It was in a city just outside of New York City. And I really wanted to drive this particular type of car. I won't use any names, but I started by moving inventory, basically cars around several lots in an urban setting, just dealing with high value inventory. And eventually I was moving the vehicles as if they were freight, because they kind of were, between dealerships throughout the Northeast. We would trade a vehicle with another dealership, and I'd be the person swapping those vehicles. So, in my adventures throughout the Northeast, I got to go into mainly New York City and Long Island all the time from New Jersey. And I got to see all that infrastructure, especially the older infrastructure around the city, around New York City. It was a real lesson in the inefficiencies of the nation's highways and how reliant commerce is on our highway system and how important the whole thing is.
Man, that background is huge, especially for car enthusiasts, how they get those vehicles to and from those dealerships and to the customer. I mean, that's
Oh yeah,
pretty important.
it is not easy. We had vehicles coming in, of course, to the port of Newark. These happen to be made in Europe, and yeah, they have to get on a truck, drive to the dealership, be offloaded in an often busy place. So, uh, nothing is easy in freight for sure.
Mm, I agree. Man, so ATRI, 19 years, maybe more. That's a long time to be with an organization. What kept you motivated and passionate about your work over the years?
So I'm proud to say now I'm at 20 years, so 2 decades. I'm closing in on what, a quarter of a century soon. That's a long time, and this is where this is where I've spent my career, right out of college. Kind of rare for someone from my generation. I guess I'm considered a Gen X. But there's no shortage of interesting challenges in the trucking industry and transportation in general. It's very complex, and I get to work on all aspects of it. I kind of get to choose my path every morning because there are easily 10 different challenges to overcome every morning, and I just roll with it every single day, and thus it does not get boring.
Nice, nice. Um, can you tell us about some of your earlier challenges or wins in your career with ATRI? Were there
Yes.
any aha moments, that you kind of knew you were in the right field?
Right out of Georgia Tech, where I got my master's degree, I was hired, and I thought this is gonna be awesome. Trucking industry, this is cool stuff. And they cannot prepare you in college for what's going to come your way, of course. One of the first challenges that came across my desk was actually related to truck GPS data. And this is like 2003, 2004, before many people were really working with this kind of telematics data where a truck is giving a position read every couple minutes and you can analyze that data and the data is enormous. So I had to very quickly learn geographic information system software, a couple programming languages to analyze the data, and I did it. It took some time, certainly. Nothing's easy, but I saw how interesting this was going to be, and I just rolled with it and got to work with some very, very large data sets. I was able to take that data, transform it into the story of how the trucking industry is operating, where we need investment to make the system more efficient. For instance, where is there a need for truck parking? One might actually say everywhere, because unfortunately drivers are sitting on this. I just drove back from Nashville yesterday, back to Atlanta, and my goodness, these drivers have to park on off ramps and on ramps because there just is not enough parking in this country. So what we can do with the GPS data is tell a state, for instance, hey, look at all these spots. You need to figure out a way to get more parking there because these drivers need to take their hours of service. They need their rest for safety. So that sort of thing. So I still work with these types of data and analysis tools just about every day, and I'm glad I went ahead and figured that out so early in my career.
Nice. Well, likewise. Thank you. Appreciate that contribution. Were there any specific mentors or experiences, maybe from Emory or Georgia Tech, that helped shape your approach or to research data analysis?
So, from Emory, that's where I did my undergraduate in political science. And I would have to say a mentor for me there would have been Dr. Robert Bartlett. He focused on political philosophy, and I studied that political philosophy across history. We're talking way back in Plato's times, all the way from the to the newer stuff, which is literally from the 1700s. It sounds unrelated, but what I learned how to do through that work at Emory with Dr. Bartlett was take ideas from across generations of thinkers and develop it into like a coherent, meaningful text that people could actually read and get something from. And oftentimes we do that same thing at Atri. We're collecting information from everywhere, and we need to make sense of it for folks. And that's what we do with our reports. From Georgia Tech, I'd have to say uh, Gordon Kingsley, Dr. Gordon Kingsley, he's a professor there. He somehow brought a lot of excitement for me to today's federal government, like how it runs, how the governance tools they have. And from that, I was able right at the beginning of my career to understand all the hurdles, regulatory and otherwise, that the trucking industry faces, and how actually um, industry and sometimes government can work towards better policy outcomes, such as, let's say, better safety technologies on board. Everyone wants a safe industry, and if the government, let's say, can give tax breaks or other incentives towards getting those kind of technologies, hey, it's a big win.
Nice. And so ATRI, its mission and key research. For those who may not be familiar, can you give us an overview of the mission and the role it plays in the trucking industry?
So, very briefly, the American Transportation Research Institute, or ATRI, we are the trucking industry's not-for-profit research organization. Uh, I work in the main office. It's in Atlanta, Georgia, where I live. And just to boil it down into one simple sentence, our mission is to provide data and analysis to improve the industry's safety, productivity, and efficiency. Our goal is to put out reports that will help make the industry better.
So, Battery has published some pretty influential studies. Can you share a couple of those reports or their impact on policy and their way that carriers operate, for transportation?
Certainly. So I guess I could point to some of the transportation finance studies we conducted. Those were very impactful, maybe 15 years ago, but they're still very impactful. How do we pay for roadways? Where does that investment go? How critical is it? Additionally, I've spent years analyzing the impact of hours of service rules. This is how many hours a driver can drive, how many hours the driver must rest in between those driving periods. Um, there were, in my opinion, there were many proposals out there, and I think the data shows this very well in our reports. There were many proposals out there to change the hours of service that were not fair to drivers. These proposals were suggesting that drivers would drive for the maximum number of hours, and they simply weren't driving that much. We looked at driver log data for tens of thousands of drivers and could not find examples of this. So through that report, we were able to get the story straight with a lot of facts, deep data analysis, and right now, we've done 3 or 4 studies on alternative fuels, battery electric trucks. And this discussion is very critical because there are states out there, California, for instance, that have literally mandates for certain carriers to start buying battery electric trucks. And we've brought to light many of the issues that must be overcome before battery powered trucks are widely used, before they fit well into our industry. These are issues that many folks were simply glossing over, and we brought them to light. And I think it's a great thing that we were able to do that.
Wow. Nice. That's a lot of background that many people don't even think about, especially with the changes that are upcoming and how much work goes into that. Man, that's an eye opener. What kind of feedback have you received from the industry about these studies? Are truckers and carriers engaged with ATRI research, or is it something that they were doing more actively in the past?
Well, I tell you, the industry is so kind. I was just at a large industry meeting up in Nashville, and industry members are constantly coming up to me and others who work at Hatchery just offering their thanks for our research. The information that we produce, they say, is actionable. It improves the bottom line, and it's just critical to the industry. And they let us know that. Really makes me feel good. Really makes me feel proud of the work that we do.
Nice. Yeah, that is amazing. Um, it's far too often hard work goes unnoticed. So I'm glad
Yes,
that
yeah.
you come on the show to let other people know as well what you guys do, and that's going to be an eye opener for a lot of people. So with transportation finance being a major focus of your work, what are some of the funding mechanisms that you studied, or um, how have they affected truckers and carriers? What would you say?
So, looking at transportation finance, let's see. It's clear that the federal fuel tax on gasoline and diesel that has been in place for decades is by far the most efficient way to collect money for highways. Nobody even really knows that they're paying it. It is not paid at the pump. It is paid far back in the supply chain at the rack, where fuel is being distributed. Um, and all of that goes to our roadways. It's 30 to 40 billion dollars a year going to our roadways. This is like the trucking industry's office space. This is where we work. So it's a great thing, a great mechanism. Unfortunately, Congress hasn't been able to increase it since 1993, and that went into effect in 1994. So it hasn't caught up with inflation. It hasn't kept up with inflation, I should say. So not enough money is going into it. Uh, I've looked at all the other options that are out there. Particularly, there are folks out there who would like to see more tolling, and there are some other ideas where every vehicle in the United States would be taxed based on mileage. And vehicles would be taxed based on road use, and you'd have to pay a bill. And I've documented the inefficiencies of these, in particular, cost collecting that money, the technology needed, or the technology needed to collect tolls these days. Diversion of toll revenues to other places, like transit. In the case of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, roughly $500 million is being diverted out of there from folks who pay for the turnpike into transit, and it's not really a pay-per-use kind of scenario if you do that. And of course, there's profit built into many of the tolling schemes out there, profit for investors, and that's just something the trucking industry really doesn't need to be funding someone's profit. Public roads are out there for a public good, and uh, obviously we want to pay for them, but we don't also want to pay someone else a little bit of profit on top, or in some cases, a whole lot of profit.
Right. Wow. Well, what's the traction on those two ideas? I think you mentioned one was the tolls, paying it that way. Is it picking up some momentum, or is it something that's just
The ideas are there's some ebb and flow with them. What really throws a wrench into this process of highway funding is electric vehicles, right?
Mhm.
We don't, we have a fuel tax. We do not have an electricity tax at the federal level, and maybe some states have dabbled with it, but people don't even know they're supposed to pay it in the states where they are supposed to pay it. And how do you pay it? You pay it by the kilowatt hour. How do you figure out how much roadway you're using based on the electricity that you're using? So that is something that's going to have to be figured out. And that debate, I believe, will continue for another 20 years. I really believe it. Some states have said, all right, our funding model is going to change fundamentally, and we're just going to charge a registration fee for electric vehicles that is higher than everyone else's vehicles. Some folks don't like that. It discourages electric vehicles, they might say, or it doesn't actually capture how much use of the roadway is going on with these vehicles. Someone could drive 100,000 miles or 10 miles, and they'd still have to pay the same registration fee. So, um, there are a lot of ideas floating around out there. There are a lot of folks out there who don't like change. I can't imagine folks uh, generally in the US would want to have a device in their car that tracked how many miles and then pay a tax on it. But that's one of the big ideas out there. Um, we've documented how much that would cost from a technology standpoint, and not sure that'll work, but that's one of the ideas out there.
Wow. Man, they're kicking it around. I hope they land on something that's fair and good for a lot of the public and even for commercial use to keep
Yeah.
stimulating the economy. Do you see any funding models that seem particularly promising um, or innovative, like states and regions experimenting with new ideas that the rest of the country should watch and look out for?
I think anyone who's looking at ways to charge electric vehicles by the kilowatt hour, any state that's looking at that is doing a service for the rest of us. That is one option. It is one option that the utilities could keep track of how much electricity is being used, and it could be a great way to fund to fund not the industry, but to fund the roadways. Right now, the big fuel companies, the big companies that sell diesel and gasoline, they essentially pay that tax in bulk and pass it on. Same idea could exist for utilities, electricity utilities. They might not want to do that. That could be an extra burden, but it may be the most efficient way. And hopefully states are looking at that as an option to fill these gaps.
Yeah. What was that again? Which one did the last one?
Oh, just looking at possibly utilities uh, being able to track how much electricity is being used by their users towards electric vehicles, and then paying a tax based on that and passing it on to consumers.
Mm. Yeah, so those charging stations probably would be something that they would probably look at.
That would be the easiest way to collect an electricity per kilowatt hour tax, because you know all the electricity going through that charger is going towards transportation. So that's a great example there. Um, how do you tackle home charging and have folks who charge their electric vehicle at home? It'd be a harder issue. I don't think it's insurmountable. So I would say for me, that would be the most promising solution to funding shortfalls.
Yeah, and so Atri also uses anonymous data. Can you walk us through how that works? Uh,
Yeah, so I alluded to it earlier, the GPS data, it is critical for our research. And we consider ourselves a trusted third party in the industry. The industry knows they can trust us. We're a not-for-profit. Certainly, folks out there in the data world, not necessarily truck data, are just in it for the money. But what we're looking at is how can we make the industry better with these data? So there are a lot of data out there in the world. Um, we don't look when we collect this information, we don't look at anything specific in our analysis, no individual trucks, no individual truck companies. We want nothing to do with that sort of thing. We aggregate and anonymize data, and the more data we have, the more anonymous it is. And we have lots of legal quote unquote stuff, I'll call it stuff, in place to ensure anonymity. And we just go from there. We're looking at what what the whole industry is doing, not necessarily what any of the parts are doing. And we've been successful doing that, like I said, for 20 years. I think we're a perfect model for using big data in a safe way that helps everyone who's out there.
nice. So, um, I mean, that's really nice to know that the data is being used in a way that is creating more of a positive insight into what's going on. So,
Hmm.
um, kind of want to talk about current challenges in the trucking industry. Let's shift to the challenges that trucking industry is currently facing. What do you see mostly pressing it as an issue today?
Oh, there are a lot of top issues out there. Certainly, when you take a look, we just released our top industry issues study, in fact, on Saturday, and I'll go through the list of those top issues, maybe look at some specifics as well. But number one, so as background, we go out to the entire trucking industry and we say, hey, what are the top issues? And thousands of folks, thousands of stakeholders fill out the survey and say these are the top issues. Number one right now is the economy, uncertainty about the economy. Number two is truck parking. That is the second biggest issue in the industry. Folks cannot find parking when they need to take their hours of service, and it weighs heavy on a driver's mind, right? Lawsuit abuse. Um, there are verdicts out there where the driver is not at fault. The driver of the other vehicle is at fault in an accident. Unfortunately, there's a fatality or an injury, but the costs being placed on the trucking company, on individual trucking companies, are in the tens of millions. and that is not sustainable. There's a lot of research on our website on what we like to call nuclear verdicts, where just these enormous awards are given to folks who were at fault. Let's say they crashed into a truck. Let's say they were using drugs or alcohol and they crashed into a truck. It just doesn't make sense to me, and it's certainly something of concern to the industry. Number four on the list would be insurance costs because of these nuclear verdicts in particular, and the cost of trucks, the rising cost of everything. Insurance costs have gone up tremendously. So that's just a little insight into some of the most pressing challenges according to the trucking industry.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a list. Man, especially the truck parking. And we mentioned that, and so kind of circle back to some of that anonymous data. Um, and you mentioned that list. Is there any surprising trends that you've discovered from analyzing data that may help with these issues?
Well, one of the biggest trends, and it makes me very proud of the industry actually, is the resilience of the trucking industry in the face of disasters. When you look at the GPS data as a whole, let's say there's a pandemic like we just had, a hurricane, we just had two hurricanes, a roadway outage. Like in North Carolina, we have two interstates that are out till sometime in 2025. And we look at like a roadway outage like I-40 in North Carolina, and we say this is how important that road was. But here's what the truckers are doing. The industry never stops. Right after hurricanes, the industry is still moving freight as close as they can get to the disaster to help folks. Um, During the pandemic, there were no cars on the roads, but the trucks kept moving. The trucks kept moving because people needed food. It's an essential industry, and all the goods that were needed by folks kept moving. And you can see it there in the data, and it's a great story, and it's wonderful to be able to take that and put that on a map and show that the industry just keeps moving in the face of anything.
Yeah. I mean, you look at, like I said, with GPS, a lot of companies use those for their tractors, even their trailers. I mean, they can see all of that movement. That's got to be pretty encouraging to see that it keeps going. I know, during the pandemic you mentioned, so that was good for us to be able to keep moving and to help a lot of people. That I was glad I was able to be a part of that. Um, so yeah, we've heard a lot about driver shortage. There's a lot of things that come into play with that. What's your take on the root causes? Is it a matter of pay, or is there just a deeper issue that lifestyle and regulations maybe that they want to peer into?
So, trucking, like a lot of jobs, trucking is a very difficult job. If you're looking for parking and then spending overnight in a sleeper berth, you're on the road away from your family. Um, it's a difficult job, but you see, however, increasing wages as a response to attract drivers. Regulations certainly will always play a role in pushing people from the industry. Um, what are drivers' biggest concerns, though? We actually ask drivers in the top industry issues survey specifically what their concerns are. Top concern is truck parking. Where are they going to be able to spend the night to get sleep so that they can ensure they can drive safe? Number two is driver compensation. The economy is number three. Driver detention is number four. And what that is a driver may arrive to deliver goods at their customer's facilities, and they may be held for 5 hours. They don't get paid during that 5 hours. They just have to sit there and wait. And that can really throw a wrench in a driver's schedule, and it costs them money. We actually just did a report showing it costs drivers thousands of dollars each year in income. So um, shippers play a role. If shippers can move the freight from trucks or move freight onto trucks when a driver's there and be responsive to the driver, that helps everyone. That helps the shipper, that helps the driver, helps trucking companies. So those are some of their biggest concerns. And of course, looking on the horizon, it doesn't help that I'd say back in 2016, folks started saying that the entire industry would be autonomous trucks within a matter of years. You see, that hasn't happened. Personally, I don't see that happening anytime soon. This is the kind of job driving around city streets, for instance. Human beings need to do that with a truck.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, you got the driver that's sitting there and not getting paid. I think I heard of drivers expressing a concern that, hey, I had two jobs. One was driving, the other was sitting and waiting.
It's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate. You get there at the time you're scheduled, and then you have to wait. And if folks aren't respectful, it's even worse.
Hurry up to wait, right? And then, the self-driving trucks, I mean, they're a cool idea and the technology is out there. That's nice. I like technology. It's pretty cool, the fact that even I can have a podcast. There's a lot of freedom that comes with technology, but then there's a lot of danger that I need to be aware of. So
Hmm.
the human factor still needs to play a part, just like me being the human factor. I mean, even though the technology is here, I gotta still be that that asset that needs to get the job done. And I like that. I like that security in the trucking industry. When your family's
Absolutely.
out there on the road, I like that feeling that there's a human versus a computer.
Yep. Yep.
Like, who do we blame? Just like the electric vehicle, who do we tax? Well, who do we blame with
And
uh,
I think you take any given driver on the interstate highway, um, driving a car, they're going to want a human being in that truck next to them. Maybe the technology makes it possible in many situations, but um, folks vote, and I believe folks really would rather have a human being driving at this point. That's just my opinion, but um, and that is literally my opinion. I like to look up and see that there is a truck driver up there, a professional truck driver who knows what they're doing, and I know they're going to drive safe next to me. And I don't know what a computer might do. Not not
we're
not
just
to
ready.
sound like I don't like technology, but I trust humans.
Thank you. I like it. So yeah, regulations. You said people vote. There's a lot of laws being put in place for safety, and your research is very important. The things you guys do there at Atri, you've done a lot of research for drivers' hours of service rules. What do you find when you show there's an impact for these rules on drivers' well-being, the industry efficiency? Um, what's the factors that come into play there?
So with that particular regulation, and there has been movement in this direction, I think drivers often need flexibility. If a driver is tired and they can take a 3 hour break, I think that's fantastic. Instead of having to wait till they take their 10-hour break, for instance. If a driver can rest for 3 hours instead of driving in Atlanta, Georgia's traffic during rush hour, I think that's fantastic too. It's better for the driver. It's better for everyone on the highway. Um, so certainly what's called split sleeper berth has been a good thing where a driver can split their time, uh, their off-duty time and their rest time by spending time in the sleeper berth. That's something that came into play, I'd say 6 years ago, maybe. Um, also, it's not just traffic, weather issues. If it's raining and it's not going to be raining later, maybe the driver wants to take a couple hours of rest. Or parking issues. Maybe they couldn't find a parking space. So flexibility is key in these regulations.
Safe parking place. A lot of times you pull over, but it's not safe, and you know that. So yeah, it's like, man, I gotta figure out this. I gotta figure this thing out.
Mhm.
Important to stay true to your hours of service, and at the same time, be safe where you pull over because the on ramps and off ramps. I mean, even though they're there, it's not always the best place. It could be dark. It could be a lot of pitch on there too. You can,
Yeah.
yeah,
And drivers say they get better sleep in an actual parking space, and I believe it. Personally, I would be very worried if I were parking on the side of the road. It wouldn't help me get a good night's sleep.
yeah. Quite a few people have gotten accidents there. So people not paying attention when they exit off the ramp. Yeah. So um, that's great that they're seeing that that is important. That's one of the episodes we put out too. Is we work with Truck Parking Club, and they're trying to find landowners, and they're trying to put that together with truck drivers, create that community so that they can find extra places for it. So I champion those guys a lot. Safety is always a major topic in trucking. The trends you may have seen over the years, safety culture with organizations. What trends have you seen for companies placing more focus on safety now than in the past?
Well, the technology that's out there, let's say lane departure warning systems, lane assist, forward collision radar, companies investing in that is great. It shows they're thinking about safety, and that safety message goes all the way from the top down. It's very important. Uh, as far as what carriers could do, let's say what can carriers do to improve their safety culture? Certainly, the technology piece. That is a way to focus on safety culture. But I went out to some trucking companies. It was years ago, and looked at their safety practices, and folks that said, "All right, we listen to our drivers." That's so important to have a line of communication, an open line of communication with drivers. If they say the driver says, "You know what? I don't think it's safe to drive. I need to pull over." You need to trust that they know what's going on. They're on the scene and understand. Being clear and consistent with safety messages. That's really important too. Just just putting out that safety is the most important thing to this company. That really creates a safety culture.
That's awesome. When it comes to the future of trucking innovations, like technology, it evolves. You mentioned like the lane departure, the mitigation systems. The trucking industry has changed rapidly, for the in regards to the trucking industry. Things usually happen very slow. So in comparison, it's happened pretty fast. What trends and technologies are you most excited about within the next 10 to 15 years?
I'm definitely excited about even further advancement in safety devices. Uh, I think they're great. Um, I think even advances in safety devices on cars will help with trucking industry safety because a lot of times there are folks doing everything in their car but driving, and that does not create a safe environment for anyone. The truck driver's there trying to do his or her job, and you probably see it every day. But I saw someone eating soup the other day out of a bowl. It looked like they had a microwave in the car, or putting on makeup. I've seen all kinds of stuff while folks are driving, no hands on the wheel. Um, Also, so technology is certainly going to help shape the trucking industry, the safety technology, I believe, and then environmental related advances and changes in trucking. There's a push towards battery electric. I'm not sure that is, at least in the short term, the best way to go. There are a lot of ways to decrease CO2 emissions, for instance. Renewable diesel and biodiesel are just an example of that. Uh, these have far less emissions than actually battery electric vehicles do, because battery elect battery electric trucks, for instance, require batteries that require all these materials that are dug out of the ground, right? Lithium, cobalt, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of pollution involved in getting those materials out of the ground and turning them into batteries. There's still pollution involved with electricity, and there will be for at least through 2050. The projection is that fossil fuels will still be powering our grid. So I think that's going to be a huge discussion. What technology is best for a cleaner environment? Um, could we continue to advance diesel engine technology to make diesel engines even cleaner? Because they've gotten significantly cleaner. I, 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 I believe the pollution of one truck a couple years ago has gone down to decreased 98% for particulate matter, um, and for other pollutants, and also new fuels. They can help decrease CO2, address climate change.
Is there someone that's able to study CNG? I don't know if is that actually that much less of a pollutant than diesel.
I cannot actually speak to that, but I do know there is natural gas that is considered renewable natural gas. Let's say, and I haven't. I'll admit I haven't studied deep into this. I've really just focused on diesel alternatives, but I believe collect. Um, you can collect natural gas, let's say from a cow farm, for instance.
Hmm?
There are energy companies out there collecting the gas that comes from cows and turning it into fuel,
Yeah, man.
instead of letting it go up into the environment. And that has a better CO2 footprint than taking it out of the ground where it's been stored for millions of years and then burning it once. And
Yeah.
that's how renewable diesel works. Renewable diesel can be made from soybeans, for instance, soybean oil. When the plant grows, it takes CO2 out of the air, and then the CO2 is put back in when it's used, but it's not taking CO2 that's been stored for millions of years from the time of the dinosaurs and putting it up into the air.
Mm. Nice. Well, we got a lot of options. It seems we just have to have the backing and the resources to promote the best one. Uh,
Hmm.
that they can get the traction on the right one, the most productive one. I feel like, as a user of it, that well, we can still keep our diesel engines and enjoy that part of it, because instead of just getting rid of it altogether, variety is going to be key. I feel like, the electric vehicles mixed together with the diesel, the petrol, the
I
CNG.
think that's a great point. Variety. There
Yeah.
is not just one solution to this, and folks shouldn't be picking one solution. There are lots of different options out there, and we need to look at all of them and look at how far we can advance them technologically. Um, because battery electric may run into some stumbling blocks. A lot of it is predicated on the fact that there will be these huge advances, and what if they don't happen in lighter weight batteries, that sort of thing. So uh, we need to look at everything as an industry, and folks out there building these options, because trucking doesn't build battery electric trucks, and we don't make electricity, but uh, there need to be as many options out there for the trucking industry to adopt as possible.
Right. Yeah, I mean, up here in Minnesota, the batteries and the CNG doesn't work that well. I think
Yes.
yeah, they don't. For that very reason, they have CNG trucks, and they decide it's better that they don't run. in the winter. I'm not sure how they do that, but variety is good. You mentioned the cows. I know there's a company that also makes drinking water from cow waste, and they're able to process it and distill it so that way they can recycle that water from cow manure. I mean,
That
that's
is amazing.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do. We just have to have the support and, like you said, that open mind to have that variety to bring to the table, to bring to the market, to create that competition, so
Mhm.
that prices doesn't get out of control as well. So yeah,
Certainly.
that's a
Certainly.
great factor. I get excited about it as well too. So your perspective and what role will infrastructure upgrades play in the success of these emerging technologies? Your perspective, I guess. Yeah.
So, let's one thing we discussed was the lane assist, lane departure warning systems. Those don't work if the striping is faded on the highway, right? They're looking at the striping. That's infrastructure. That is an infrastructure need. If there are potholes shaking the truck around, the technology just isn't going to work as well. So
Mm.
we need high quality roadways for these technologies to work. For technology on board a truck to see the lane, it needs to be striped. It's just that simple. And then when you get off the highways, it gets even worse in some cities. I mean,
You mentioned I-40.
and then there's I-40 where which is out till some point in 2025, they say. And it's a natural disaster. There's certainly these things happen, and it is going to take a long time. But right now, uh, some drivers are gonna have to go around that through Atlanta. Not a good option. Hours more driving. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. Hopefully they can fast track that. Hopefully the funding's there. They can fast track that. We've put out PowerPoint slides using the GPS data showing how critical that piece of infrastructure is to the trucking industry. That's what we're bringing to the table, so that folks in the federal government, US DOT, can see how important this road is and how we need it back up as an industry.
Wow, I mean, that's really great to see that you guys are pitching in and helping to see that, hey, this is where funds should be allocated. And it's important for the livelihood of those people in that area. They've been devastated. And it's nice to know that there's a lot of support groups going in. In fact, that people they're not even aware of that research. Yeah, seeing that is going to be key. So thank you guys for helping that out. That's my home state too, North Carolina. That's where I was born.
All
So
right.
a little bit of that area touches my heart. So, but I was more so towards the other side of it. So closer to Rocky Mount. Yeah, Rocky Mount, North Carolina, in the center state of it. So, but yeah, I-40, even out west, drivers will talk about it all the time. The potholes are just violent out there
Yeah.
going to Arizona. It's just, yeah, that road can be rough.
Anywhere where there's ice, water gets in there and expands and contracts, and um,
That's true.
but don't worry, we have plenty of potholes in Atlanta without the ice.
Well, and all the traffic you guys have there. Atlanta was one that they wanted to make more of a rail system for public transportation. How did that turn out?
Um, let's let's just say a lot of folks here are dependent on their cars.
Right.
Uh, the public transit system is great for a lot of things. It just needs honestly, it needs to go to a lot more places, and that's a difficult thing
Yeah.
to put on track, really. Uh, hopefully we can do it. The way I see mass transit is the more four wheelers, the more cars we can get off the road, the easier it is for trucks to drive through a city. So there is a benefit there for the trucking industry if we can get more folks off driving their cars and taking mass transit. It
Well,
just has, in my opinion, it has a long way to go in Atlanta, Georgia.
yeah, so we got work to do. Just to kind of close things out for our listeners who engaged ATRI's research or support the work you're doing, they want to get involved. What's the best way for them to get involved?
All right, so I would start by going to Atri's website. It's just one word, www.truckingresearch.org. You can, when you're there, you can sign up for our newsletter. We put out a newsletter. You can sign up to hear about all of our new research, our research press releases. Everything I discussed today, we have research on that website. It's free. All of our reports are free. All of our past research is free. You can just go on and download it. Sometimes it'll ask you for your name, organization, that sort of thing. We like to see who we're impacting out there. That's why we ask for your name. We want to see who's interested in the work that we're doing. And of course, as a charitable organization, donations to ATRI, you can make them through our website. They're tax deductible. So I like to let folks know that as well.
Awesome. And Jeff, my hat's off to you guys and the work that you're doing. And I hope that you get the support you need and the engagement as well. Putting the word out there about what you guys do and starting this great conversation. I'm glad to be a part of it. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us and the insights that you're able to share and eye openers, right, to what's going on out there in the industry. And hopefully people can see that how important the value of what it's meant to be. So it's a clear that the work you guys are doing at ADTRI, you guys are doing it to have a real impact on the industry. So I thank you for that.
Well, thanks, Ray. Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll reach out maybe later, maybe a year from now, and see what progress is coming around. And I look forward to hearing from you. And I'm sure our listeners are going to be tuning in for another episode. So maybe we can do this again.
Certainly. Certainly. That would be fantastic.
Awesome. All right. Well, and to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of That's Delivered. If you want more from A-Tree's research, head on over to truckingresearch.org, where you can explore the latest studies and reports. Don't forget to follow us on social media if you have any questions or want to leave a review. For any updates for future episodes. We look forward to it. We love hearing from you guys. And if you have any good ideas or topics for your guests, our guests, we love to hear from you. So send them our way. And we love to hear from you. Until next time, stay safe on the road and keep on delivering. That's delivered, baby.